Oh my goodness, that's a great question because you would probably get just a handful of people that would be on that list.
At 68, Vince Gill has spent nearly 5 decades inside the country music industry. And if you ask almost anyone who has worked alongside him, the same word comes up again and again: generous. Not nice in the hollow, PR-approved sense, but generous in a way that actually matters in a recording studio. Showing up, listening hard, and making the person standing next to the microphone sound better than they did before he walked in. That reputation isn't rumor or spin. It's documented across 4 decades of album credits, award ceremonies, and interviews. And it tells a far more interesting story than any list of secret grudges ever could. This is that story, the real one. Vincent Grant Gill was born on April 12, 1957, in Norman, Oklahoma, into a household where music wasn't a side interest. It was the air everyone breathed. His father, a federal appellate judge by profession, was also a guitar and banjo player who taught his son the instruments that would define his life. By his teenage years, young Vince was already playing in local bluegrass bands, developing fluency not just on guitar, but on fiddle, dobro, mandolin, and bass, a breadth of instrumental skill that would set him apart from almost every other singer of his generation. Bluegrass, unlike the polished radio country that would later make him famous, is a genre built on tight harmony and instrumental interplay. It teaches musicians to listen to each other, to leave space, to serve the song rather than the ego. That foundation shaped everything that came after. In the late 1970s, Gill left Oklahoma for Los Angeles and landed the lead singer spot in the soft rock band Pure Prairie League, fronting the group from 1978 to 1982. He sang lead on their hit single Let Me Love You Tonight and contributed several songs to the band's catalog. It was a formative stretch, not because it made him a superstar, but because it placed him inside a working band, singing harmony, trading instrumental parts, and learning the mechanics of ensemble music from the inside. After Pure Prairie League, he spent time playing guitar in Rodney Crowell's backing band, the Cherry Bombs, a group that also included a young Tony Brown, the producer who would later help shape Gill's biggest solo records. Nashville was calling. And in 1983, Gill answered, relocating to Music City and signing a solo deal with RCA Records. Gill's first RCA album, Turn Me Loose, arrived in 1984 and earned him the Academy of Country Music's top new male vocalist award. An auspicious start. But the records that followed didn't match that early promise commercially. And for several years, Gill's name was more likely to appear in the credits of other people's albums than at the top of the charts. This is the part of his story that rarely gets told with enough weight. During those lean years, Gill built his reputation as one of Nashville's most in-demand session players and harmony singers, working with Reba McEntire, Emmylou Harris, Roseanne Cash, and Bonnie Raitt. He wasn't chasing the spotlight. He was learning to be indispensable in the background, a skill that would define his entire career, long after he became famous enough not to need it. Everything changed in 1989, when Gill signed with MCA Nashville and released When I Call Your Name, an album steeped in traditional country instrumentation and produced by Tony Brown. The title track, a duet with Patty Loveless, climbed to number 2 on the Billboard Hot Country Songs chart and won Gill his first Grammy Award for Best Male Country Vocal Performance, along with Song of the Year honors from the Country Music Association. The album eventually went double platinum. It's worth pausing on that first big single, because it set the template for so much of what followed. Even at the moment of his commercial breakthrough, Gill chose to share the spotlight with a duet partner rather than stand alone in the center of the frame. The 1990s were Gill's commercial high-water mark. Every album he released that decade was certified platinum or higher by the RIA, with 1992's I Still Believe in You reaching quintuple platinum status and becoming his best-selling record. The title track gave Gill his first number 1 hit on the Hot Country Songs chart, and it was followed by Don't Let Our Love Start Slip Away, One More Last Chance, and Trying to Get Over You. 4 solo chart toppers between 1992 and 1994 alone. He hosted the CMA Awards broadcast repeatedly during this stretch, his easy humor and evident affection for his peers making him a natural fit for a night built around celebrating other artists. But even at the peak of his solo fame, Gill kept showing up on other people's records. In 1993, He provided guest vocals on Reba McEntire's The Heart Won't Lie, which became a #1 hit. McEntyre had originally planned to record the song as a duet with Kenny Rogers, but switched partners after the two couldn't find a key that suited both voices comfortably, choosing Gill instead. That same era saw him lend harmony vocals to Dolly Parton's album Eagle When She Flies, alongside guests Emmylou Harris and Lori Morgan, and to Patti Loveless's Only What I Feel. In 1991, he sang and played guitar on Mark O'Connor's cover of Restless, a track that also featured Steve Wariner and Ricky Skaggs trading lead vocals, the kind of all-star lineup where a lesser ego might have angled for more spotlight. Instead, the recording won a Grammy for Best Country Collaboration with Vocals and a CMA Vocal Event of the Year award for all 4 musicians together. Gill also wrote Here We Are for the band Alabama, which reached #2 on the country charts in 1991, a reminder that his generosity extended to songwriting credits as well as vocal cameos. When asked years later what allowed his voice to blend so naturally into so many different artists' records, Gill pointed to his ears and his instinct to serve the song. He described his role on the majority of his session work as part of the supporting cast, there to enhance what someone else was doing rather than to compete with it. Gill's personal life ran alongside his musical one in ways that shaped both. He married singer Janice Oliver of the duo Sweethearts of the Rodeo in 1980. The couple had a daughter, Jenny, in 1982, and divorced in 1997. In 1993, Gill first crossed paths professionally with Christian music artist Amy Grant when he invited her to appear on his televised Christmas special. The two later recorded the duet House of Love for Grant's album of the same name in 1994, a song that notably became a hit on the pop charts, introducing Grant's audience to Gill and vice versa. Gill and Grant married in March 2000, and their daughter Karina was born the following year. Their musical partnership continued well beyond the wedding. Grant appeared as a guest vocalist on Gill's 2006 box, Set These Days, alongside Sheryl Crow, and in 2019 Gill wrote, When My Amy Prays for his album Okie, a tribute to his wife that went on to win him a Grammy Award for Best Country Solo Performance in 2021, his 22nd Grammy overall, and the most ever won by a solo male artist in country music history. Even as his own stardom grew, Gill never stopped showing up as a guest. He sang a new version of I Will Always Love You with Dolly Parton in 1995. He covered the Eagles' I Can't Tell You Why for a 1993 tribute album, working alongside former Eagles member Timothy B. Schmidt, a small, easy-to-miss detail that becomes significant a couple of decades later. He sang backing vocals for Brooks and Dunn on Building Bridges in 2006. He appeared on Brad Paisley's Grammy-winning instrumental showcase Cluster Pluck in 2008, trading guitar licks with a lineup of the genre's best players rather than trying to outplay any of them. He sang on Kelly Clarkson's Don't Rush in 2012, joined Carrie Underwood for a live duet of How Great Thou Art at the 2011 ACM Girls Night Out special, played guitar and sang backup on Chris Young's #1 single Sober Saturday Night in 2016, and appeared on Maren Morris's Dear Hate in 2017. Across genres, generations, and levels of fame, the pattern never changed. When someone needed a voice or a guitar part that would elevate a song without overshadowing it, Gill's name kept coming up. Gill's love of ensemble music never faded, even at the height of his commercial success. From 2010 to 2020, he was a member of the Time Jumpers, a western swing and bluegrass group that recorded several albums together, a return in some ways to the small group musicianship of his teenage years in Oklahoma. In 2013, he teamed up with steel guitarist Paul Franklin for Bakersfield, an album covering the songs of Merle Haggard and Buck Owens, honoring the Bakersfield sound that shaped so much of California country music. A decade later, in 2023, the two reunited for Sweet Memories, the music of Ray Price and the Cherokee Cowboys, another tribute record built around honoring the musicians who came before him rather than centering himself. Perhaps the clearest evidence of how deeply Gill's collaborative reputation runs through the industry came in 2017, following the death of Eagles founding member Glenn Frey. The surviving members of one of the best-selling rock bands in American history needed someone who could step into an irreplaceable role, Someone with the vocal range, the guitar skill, and just as importantly, the temperament to join a band as storied and complicated as the Eagles without disrupting what made it work. They chose Gill. He began touring with the band that year and became an official member, serving as co-lead guitarist and providing both backup and lead vocals depending on the song. He contributed to the band's Hotel California residency at the MGM Grand in Las Vegas starting in 2019 and has continued through the group's subsequent Long Goodbye tour, including dates at the Sphere in Las Vegas. It's a role that has now lasted longer than many of Gill's own solo album cycles, and it stands as one of the more remarkable second acts in modern music. A country legend, already inducted into the Country Music Hall of Fame, spending his 60s helping carry one of rock's most beloved catalogs on the road. Gill's 2019 album, Okie, was among the most personal records of his career, an autobiographical reflection on his Oklahoma upbringing and the people who shaped him. Critics praised its introspective songwriting, and the album's tribute to Amy Grant, When My Amy Prays, became the 22nd Grammy of his career. By this point, Gill had accumulated more Grammy Awards than any other solo male country artist in history, alongside 18 CMA Awards, including 2 Entertainer of the Year trophies and 5 Male Vocalist of the Year honors. He was inducted into the Country Music Hall of Fame in 2007 and received a star on the Hollywood Walk of Fame in 2012. In 2014, he received the CMA's Irving Waugh Award of Excellence, only the 6th artist to receive it since its creation in 1983. Away from music, Gill has built a reputation as a devoted golfer, competing at a scratch level and organizing charity tournaments for years. He was inducted into the Tennessee Golf Hall of Fame in 2005 and received the Old Tom Morris Award from the Golf Course Superintendents Association of America in 2022 for his lifetime commitment to the game. He also serves on the board of the Nashville Predators Foundation. None of this is the stuff of tabloid headlines. It's the record of a man who has spent his career and his free time showing up for institutions and communities rather than positioning himself against other artists. Somewhere in the middle of his rapid 1990s ascent, Gill was inducted into the Grand Ole Opry, the institution that has functioned as country music's spiritual home since the 1920s. Opry membership isn't handed out for chart performance alone. It comes with an expectation of continued presence, of showing up on the Opry stage for decades, often for little more than the honor of standing where generations of country legends have stood before. Gill has spent much of his career doing exactly that, appearing regularly long after his commercial peak had passed, often introducing younger or lesser-known acts to Opry audiences and lending his name and his guitar to package shows that didn't need a star of his caliber to sell tickets. It's a small, unglamorous form of generosity, the kind that rarely makes headlines, but it's consistent with everything else in his career. A willingness to spend his standing in the industry lifting other people up rather than hoarding the spotlight for himself. It's worth returning to a detail that's easy to skim past. In 1993, Gill contributed a cover of the Eagles, I Can't Tell You Why, to the tribute album Common Thread. The Songs of the Eagles, working in the studio alongside former Eagles bassist Timothy B. Schmidt. At the time, it was simply one session among many for a singer who logged an enormous number of guest appearances throughout the decade. Looked at in hindsight, though, it reads almost like foreshadowing. 2.5 decades later, when the Eagles needed someone to step into Glenn Frey's vocal and guitar parts after his death, they weren't choosing a stranger to the band's music or its members. They were choosing someone who had already spent time inside their songs, who understood the architecture of the harmonies well enough to recreate them live night after night, in arenas and residencies around the world. That's not the kind of opportunity that falls into a musician's lap by accident. It's the product of decades spent being the person other artists trust with their material. Gill's influence extends well past his own catalog and into the careers of younger artists who grew up listening to his records or working alongside him in Nashville studios and writers' rooms. He's spoken often about admiring musicianship over image, about caring more for a well-crafted lyric and a clean, honest vocal than for chart strategy. And that philosophy has shaped how younger pickers and singers think about their own craft. Musicians who came up in Nashville during and after Gill's commercial peak have pointed to him as a standard for technical skill paired with emotional restraint, Proof that a song doesn't need spectacle to connect. It needs honesty and control. That combination, precision married to feeling, is often cited by session musicians and songwriters as the Vince Gill approach. Know your instrument well enough that the technique disappears, and let the emotion of the song do the work. His approach to guitar playing in particular has become something of a reference point in Nashville session circles. Renowned for both his rhythm work and his lead playing, Gill has been described by critics as someone whose guitar chops rival any elite session player in the city, and yet he rarely uses that skill to dominate a track. Instead, his playing tends to serve the song the way his vocal harmonies do, tasteful, precise, and never longer or louder than the moment calls for. That restraint is a discipline, not an accident, and it's part of why band leaders and producers have kept calling him back into the studio for 40 years running. Across his catalog, Gill's songwriting has consistently returned to themes of love, loss, faith, and reflection, rendered in plain, direct language rather than clever wordplay for its own sake. Go Rest High on That Mountain, written in part as a tribute to his brother and later performed at the funerals of several fellow musicians, became one of the defining country ballads of the 1990s and won Gill Grammy honors for both song and vocal performance. Songs like that one explain why Gill's reputation as a songwriter runs just as deep as his reputation as a vocalist or a guitarist. He's someone artists turn to not just to sing a hook, but to help carry the emotional weight of a genuinely difficult moment, whether that's grief, heartbreak, or gratitude. That's a different kind of collaboration than a radio duet. It's the kind that gets called on for funerals and tributes because people trust Gill to handle it with care. If there's a single thread that runs through every chapter of Vince Gill's career, it's consistency. Not consistency of sound. His catalog moves from bluegrass to soft rock to honky-tonk traditionalism to western swing to arena rock with the Eagles, but consistency of character. The same instinct that had a teenage bluegrass picker in Oklahoma learning to blend his voice into a group harmony is the instinct that, decades later, had one of the best-selling solo artists in country music history quietly logging guest vocal credits on records by singers half his age. It's the same instinct that turned an Opry induction into an ongoing commitment rather than a one-time honor, and the same instinct that made him the natural choice when a legendary rock band needed to fill an irreplaceable seat. None of that is the stuff of scandal. It doesn't lend itself to a dramatic thumbnail or a list of secret enemies. But it is, by any reasonable measure, a far more remarkable story than a fabricated feud could ever be. A musician who built one of the most decorated careers in the history of American popular music largely by making other people sound better, and who kept doing it long after he had nothing left to prove. There's a temptation, especially online, to look at someone with as spotless a public reputation as Vince Gill and assume there must be a hidden, darker version underneath, a private list of grudges, a secret feud, a mask slipping to reveal the real him. But when you actually trace Gill's career, session credit by session credit, award by award, the picture that emerges isn't a contradiction of his public image. It's the evidence for it. This is an artist who spent his lean years learning to make other singers sound better, who chose a duet partner for his breakthrough single instead of going it alone, who kept showing up as a backing vocalist and guest guitarist for 3 decades after he'd already become one of the best-selling artists in country music, who joined one of the biggest rock bands on the planet not by pushing his way in, but by being the obvious, trusted choice when a legendary lineup lost one of its own, who writes songs about his wife that go on to win Grammys, and who spends his golf course time raising money for charity rather than settling scores. Vince Gill's reputation as country music's nicest guy isn't a mask. It's a resume. And after nearly 50 years in the business, that resume speaks for itself far more convincingly than any anonymous insider ever could. It's worth asking honestly, why stories claiming a hidden, resentful side to a famously kind public figure tend to spread so easily in the first place. Part of it is simple curiosity. Audiences are naturally drawn to the idea that a polished public image might be hiding something rawer underneath, because that kind of reveal feels like insight rather than gossip. But with an artist like Gill, whose career is unusually well documented through decades of album credits, award records, and on-the-record interviews, that curiosity runs into a wall of actual evidence. and the evidence points the other way. The traceable facts don't support a secret list of grudges. They support a working musician who has spent nearly 50 years turning up, contributing, and stepping back to let someone else's song shine. That's a less sensational story than a feud list, but it's the one that's actually true. And it's the one that explains why so many artists across so many genres have chosen, again and again, to put Vince Gill's name on their records. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed learning the real story behind one of country music's most respected musicians, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more.